I'm the doctor, by the way. What's your name? Rose. Nice to meet you, Rose. Run for your life. Hello, YouTube. Film Buff 06 here. And I just thought I'd go back to doing Doctor Who reviews for one video only. Now, since we have recently celebrated the 10th anniversary of when Doctor Who came back to our screens, I thought it would be appropriate enough to do a very special review of one of, if not, the most important episode in Doctor Who history. A landmark episode in British TV history. The unearthly child of the 21st century. The one that firmly put Doctor Who on the map again as one of the BBC's most profitable and, flagship programmes. And the episode without which us Whovians in the YouTube community wouldn't be talking about Doctor Who to this very day. And of course I'm talking about the very first episode of New Who, the opener to Series 1, Rose, which was initially broadcast on BBC One on Saturday the 26th of March 2005. It was written by the brilliant Russell T Davies, who also helped to executive produce the rebooted show with Julie Gardner, and it was directed by Keith Boak, who also went on to direct the Slitheen two-parter, Aliens of London and World War III for Series 1. It was also Christopher Eccleston's debut story as the Ninth Doctor, despite not featuring a regeneration, which I think was a clever idea at the time on Davies' part. Anyway, it also introduced us to the very first companion of modern Who in the form of former pop star at the time, Billie Piper as Rose Tyler. Plus, this episode not only introduced us to Camille Coduri as Rose's mum, Jackie, and Noel Clarke as her boyfriend, Mickey Smith, but also featured the return of the Autons and the Nestine consciousness for the first time since Spearhead from Space and Terror of the Autons from the John Pertwee era of the early 1970s. And this episode also features a plot-specific cameo appearance by Mark Benton before he went on to play Daniel Chalk in Waterloo Road. Now, to those of you who are not Whovians like myself, here is a bit of a history lesson for you. Even though those of you who are Whovians would probably already know this. Doctor Who was initially axed in 1989 due to poor ratings, problematic production values, and a huge lack of support from the BBC. And ever since then, loads and loads of people sort of unfairly took the piss out of the show and perceived it to be a total joke due to the way the BBC, under chairman Michael Grade at the time, messed it up during the late 80s. In 1996, American film producers at Fox attempted to revive the show with a feature-length pilot for a newly Americanized reboot of the show featuring Paul McGann's Eighth Doctor. And we all know how that turned out. In terms of ratings, although it received over 9 million viewers here in the UK, the TV movie didn't do well enough in the States to ensure an immediate return for the show. Russell fought tirelessly hard to convince the BBC that the show had to be brought back, not only for long-time fans like himself who grew up watching the classic series, but also for a whole new generation of fans in the 21st century who would not otherwise know what Doctor Who is. He also originally pitched this episode to the BBC under the working title Rose Meets the Doctor, but just before production began, the title was then gradually shortened to just Rose. Now, the plot of Rose is very simple and told from the perspective of a normal working-class 19-year-old London shop girl named Rose Tyler, played by Billie Piper, who feels dissatisfied with her boring, ordinary life until she meets a mysterious stranger who calls himself the Doctor, played by Christopher Eccleston, who turns her world upside down when he saves her from being attacked at work by a horde of living plastic mannequins known as the Autons, who attempt to stage an alien invasion of planet Earth by converting everything into plastic. So it's up to the Doctor and Rose to stop them by finding out where the Nestine consciousness is controlling them from and save the day. Now, when this episode was first transmitted, a really embarrassing incident occurred during the beginning sequence where Rose gets attacked by the Autons, when a voiceover recording of Graham Norton hosting Strictly Dance Fever at the time, which by the way was if you don't know it, it was a spin-off show of Strictly Come Dancing. Of anyway, it was accidentally played in the background during that sequence, which is rather, comically, weird, when you think about it. And thankfully the BBC managed to quickly solve this problem in time for the Doctor to say his first line. Almost a week after Rose was broadcast, the BBC saw how much of a ratings success it was, and shortly announced that they had already commissioned Series 2, as well as the first Christmas special being the Christmas Invasion. So, what are my thoughts on Rose? How does it hold up a decade after its broadcast? Well, I wouldn't say it's one of the best episodes ever, but I will say that it brilliantly did what it set out to do, which was to bring the show back for a whole new generation of fans. And I like the fact that it doesn't feel like a reboot, that it feels fresh, and that it feels like a completely new show, but yet at the same time, at its core, it is still the same show that we've all taken to our hearts for the past 51 years, now 52 years now. Anyway, it's sort of like when Christopher Nolan revitalized the Batman franchise with Batman Begins, or when Casino Royale rebooted the James Bond franchise with Daniel Craig. The story is very simple, well structured, and is somewhat familiar to Spearhead from Space, what with the introduction of a new Doctor and a new companion, the use of the Autons and the Nestine consciousness as the villains, and so forth. Russell's script is just brilliantly well written, with some humorous moments, like the memorable scene where Jackie attempts to flirt with the Doctor. Inside jokes, like a photo shown of the Doctor standing within a crowd during the assassination of President Kennedy on the 22nd of November 1963, which of course is a knowing nod to the fact that Kennedy died a day before the very first episode of Doctor Who, An Unearthly Child, was broadcast. References to the classic series, like a recreation of the scene from Spearhead from Space when the Autons smash through the shop windows, as well as a little reference to Tom Baker's debut story, Robot, when the Doctor analyses his appearance in the mirror, and also implied references to the Shadow Proclamation and the Time War, and especially the Time War for the first time in the revived series. A lot of people at the time criticised this episode for some of its, childish humour, like the scene where Mickey gets swallowed up by the burping wheelie bin. My opinion, yes, it's childish. Yes, it felt a bit cartoony. But I honestly didn't mind it, really. I thought it was quite funny in a I thought it was quite funny in a sense, actually. So Keith Boak's direction is brilliant, especially during the scene where Rose reacts to the inside of the TARDIS for the first time. Also, if you thought Birdman was the first movie that looked like it was shot in just one single take, just check out the fantastic tracking shot when the Doctor and Rose are walking around the council estate. That was brilliant. Very well done. The TARDIS interior design for the 9th Doctor, I thought, looked magnificent, bigger and more organic than any TARDIS interior had ever been before at that point in time. The visual effects, especially for the Nestene consciousness, are good, if a bit, dated in places. In some places, anyway. Despite giving us his brilliant rendition of the iconic theme tune and the Doctor's theme for the first time in the series, Murray Gold's music in this episode is great, but isn't really as grand and epic as his later works throughout the series. In fact, I thought it was a bit cheesy in some areas, but maybe that's just me. Whilst I do think the Autons were the perfect villain to kickstart the revived series, instead of the Daleks straight away. I thought they were underused and somewhat rushed in this episode, and it seemed as if they were only there as fan service to those who grew up with the classic series. Likewise with the Zygons in Day of the Doctor. Mickey and Jackie's characters were very likeable and relatable due to some great performances from Noel Clarke and Camille Coduri, and as we all know, both characters would eventually go on to be further developed throughout the course of the series to come. I thought Mark Benton's extended cameo as the conspiracy theorist Clive was brilliant, and the character itself, you know, helped to represent the long-time fan, you know, like Russell, who has been following the Doctor's adventures very, very closely ever since the beginning, which makes it all the more tragic when his character eventually gets killed off by an auton towards the end of the episode. Despite the fact that there were some aspects of Rose Tyler's character I didn't really like in this episode, like when she mopes about her boring life, when she hangs up on her own mum when she has just experienced an alien attack from living plastic shop window dummies, and especially at the end when she leaves her lovely but wimpy boyfriend to time travel with the Doctor. I thought she was nonetheless a great companion, and I like the fact that she fills a similar role to Ian and Barbara in An Unearthly Child as sort of the audience surrogate. We actually get a chance to see the Doctor's world through her eyes, through the eyes of the companion. Now, a lot of people thought that Billie Piper was probably going to suck as the new companion due to her reputation as a pop singer at the time. Not only did she prove those people wrong, not only did I think she was just gorgeous and attractive to look at, but I also thought she did such a brilliant job in the role, and the early chemistry between her and Christopher Eccleston was just instantaneous and enjoyable to watch, especially when during an argument, Rose asks the Doctor, "If you're an alien, how come you sound like you're from the North?" To which the Doctor replies, "Lots of planets have a North." That was just priceless. I mean, absolutely priceless, that moment. Despite the fact that ever since leaving the role after one series because he didn't want to be typecast, which as proven by his subsequent roles in The Borrowers, G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, and Thor the Dark World, he unfortunately has. Despite the fact that he professes himself in interviews to not having grown up with the show, and admitting that the only reason he wanted to play the Doctor was because he thought he was just doing a job for Russell, and despite the fact that he is such an arrogant, self-centered, egotistical prick for declining Moffat's offer to appear in The Day of the Doctor, even for at least 2 to 3 seconds after his regeneration from John Hurt's War Doctor. I thought Christopher Eccleston's debut performance as the 9th Doctor in this episode was, no pun intended, fantastic. From the moment he said that first word in that strong, badass northern accent, run, he was instantly the Doctor from then on in, and he had a commanding screen presence. For me, the defining moment for his Doctor happened in this episode, and it was his very poetic and just plain awesome turning of the earth speech. That was fantastic. Also within his performance, Eccleston reminded me of a younger William Hartnell, with the physicality of John Pertwee, the mischief of Tom Baker, and the vulnerability of Peter Davison and Patrick Troughton. Plus, I just love the fact that Russell did an absolutely brilliant job of adding a brand new layer of darkness and mystique to the Doctor, with the idea at the time that he was a war veteran who believed himself to be the last of the Time Lords, the last of his kind, and had been somewhat traumatized by all the terrible things he believes that he had to do during the Time War. Also the leather jacket that Eccleston wore, I thought perfectly suited his Doctor, and it really gave him the look of a classic Doctor wearing a piece of simple 21st century clothing, which of course Colin Baker which of course, as we all know, Colin Baker wanted, instead of that ridiculous Technicolor atrocity he ended up with. Now, despite my reservations on Rose leaving Mickey to travel with the Doctor, the ending, I thought, was a perfect way to introduce an entirely new legion of viewers to the show. It was as if Russell was reassuring us, very rightly, that Doctor Who was back and was here to stay to this very day in 2015. Very day, right now, in 2015. I mean, now I would highly suggest starting with this episode if you want to get into Doctor Who, if you haven't been if you haven't been a fan of the show before, or even want to introduce new fans to the show. In conclusion, my overall rating for Rose is a 7 out of 10. And really, all that's left for me to say is, Russell, if you're watching this video right now, which I very much assume you are, on behalf of myself and the millions of Whovians around the world, and not just the UK, and not just here in the UK, I just want to directly say thank you so much for bringing one of your and our favourite sci-fi TV shows of all time back to our screens where he belonged just over 10 years ago. And had this episode not been broadcast, we Whovians in the YouTube community would not even be talking about Doctor Who today. We would not have had four or five amazing doctors over the past decade. Not just Christopher Eccleston, but also David Tennant, Matt Smith, John Hurt, and even Peter Capaldi now. We would not have celebrated the show's 50th anniversary in spectacular fashion with Day of the Doctor, nearly 3 years ago now, just over 2 years ago, and we would not have recently celebrated 10 years of the revival of such a fantastic, phenomenal, and awesome show as Doctor Who. On a personal note, if Doctor Who did not make its triumphant comeback on that fateful day, on the 26th of March 2005, I wouldn't be the sort of person I am today. I wouldn't be making my very own YouTube channel, and I wouldn't even be writing my own fanfiction crossover quadrilogy of the worlds of Doctor Who and Hollyoaks, which by the way is a guilty pleasure of mine in my opinion anyway. For all of that, Russell, I and all other Whovians around the world salute you, sir. Thank you very much. Now, feel free to leave a comment in the section below and let me know your thoughts on Rose and what the experience was like for you to watch the show make its comeback over 10 years ago. Plus, feel free to subscribe to my channel. And until my next video, which is going to be a review of About a Boy with Hugh Grant, do take care, everyone, and Geronima.